Oh, well, here we go. Hello, Doodlebugs. Welcome to the ArtCast. This is Mary Doodles, and you're watching a real-time painting happening. So, as always, if you're into more of the time-lapse quick videos, there's going to be a link on the screen and in the description below as to where you can watch the time-lapse version of this painting. I paid the cost to be the boss. I'll tell you a little bit about this painting as we go, and then answer some of your questions and read some of your responses. So technical note on this video, you may notice that it's starting right off the bat with this splatter. So this was a watercolor painting that I made, turning a splatter into a full painting. I had no idea what it would be when I started, but I kind of figured it out part of the way through. And as for the footage of me making the splatter, I've been spending the last 20 minutes trying to locate it. I think my theory right now is that my friend has it. My friend Morgan, who has been editing some of my videos this year. And so I might be checking in with him, but I figured I'd just go ahead and make this video because I'm kind of on a time crunch. It's been a very exciting weekend. There's a little baby that's been born a little early, not too early, but yeah, we thought we were going to be doing this in December. And instead, Dante's parents are in town and we're doing baby stuff and prepping that, which is exciting and fun and awesome. But then alongside that too, I'm working on a project which I can't tell you too much about right now, but it's going to be fun. I'm just going to be promoting it, but not giving you details. You're going to love it. I'm loving it. It's exciting. It's new. It's different. But it's something I've been wanting to do for a while, and I'm currently working on that as well. So it's been a bit of a time crunch and an exciting weekend and week. So that's where that's at. And I just decided I'm going to do an ArtCast because we're due for one. I'm going to try to do one a month for you because you seem to like it. Like I said, this painting is a watercolor on watercolor paper. And this particular paper was sent to me by Jerry's Artorama, amazing art shop. And they have an amazing YouTube channel where Mike, not Jerry, does a lot of tutorials and tips. So it's a really great resource. If you haven't checked it out, if you don't know about it, there's going to be a link in the description below. Jerry's Artorama. And yeah, the YouTube channel is a very valuable resource. And he's really good at articulating more of the technical stuff as well as some of the conceptual thoughts surrounding being an artist and doing creative things. So I highly recommend checking him out. So this paper that I'm using is a handmade watercolor fancy paper that came in a little gift pack that they sent me. And I've been very hesitant to use it. It's that kind of thing, especially for young artists, when you get your first nice sketchbook and you almost don't want to draw on it. It was a little bit of that, but I've been working on it and it is so nice. It's definitely, it's different. It's a very soft watercolor paper. So I find that the watercolor it bleeds very nicely, which is great for some effects, especially splatters and washy things. If you want beautiful, soft gradients, like on this particular piece, there's that orange with the reds, the pinks, they fade together so nicely. It's excellent for that. I found that it is a little more difficult if you're doing hard edges, if you want crisp, clean lines. Probably not the best, in my opinion, for ink work. But again, that's my opinion. It is an expensive paper, probably not for beginners. If you're trying watercolor for the first time, maybe invest in something a little more economically friendly. But if you're like, I want to treat myself and I got a little extra cash, it's good. What is it called? Shoot, I don't have it in front of me. I will make a note to put in the description the brand of watercolor paper if you're interested in getting it, as well as a link to Jerry's Artorama. The brush I'm using, what kind of brush is this? I dropped it. I'm picking you up, brush, because I want to tell people what you are. The brand is Raphael, and it is imitation squirrel. And I'm only saying this because it has been these brushes. I have two of them. I got a size something and a size a little smaller than the something, and they're really nice, actually. Imitation squirrel, who knew? It's a very soft brush. So with the soft brush on soft watercolor paper, I think it's allowed for a nice, smooth and gentle experience when painting, because it's all about that experience. So how about the technique? By the way, you may have looked in the timeline and realized, oh, I better buckle up because this is a long video. Yeah, darn tootin'. I got a lot of comments to read too. So we're going to fill that void of time and just fritter it away until we die. So this technique of turning a splatter into a painting, I love this. I don't have to plan ahead, which is always nice. And there's a little pressure, yes, to actually turn it into something worthwhile. But I'm finding more and more that I don't mind that pressure as much. I don't know if it's just because I'm more comfortable with painting and drawing, or I do this kind of thing too, with improv on stage on a regular basis. And I think I'm over that fear of the unknown sometimes. I mean, I'm definitely nervous, and especially with this special precious paper, I don't want to burn through pages of like, nope, this isn't working. Oh, this isn't working. So wow. Yeah. Now that I say it, it's like, why did I choose the fanciest paper to do the most reckless piece on? Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm such a privileged person. Anyway, this is a really fun exercise to do if you have scrap paper that you maybe messed up a painting on, and you're like, what do I do with this? Maybe on the other side, like just practice this as a game so that if you don't like it, you can burn it. And if you love it, then hooray, you feel better about yourself. But yeah, it's really fun. And it's kind of like the ink blot idea where, you just have this splatter and you look at it and you see something in it. And when I do this, whether it's turning a splatter into a drawing or doing the scribble drawing challenge where you just do a scribble and turn that into something, I think the helpful thing about that is not trying to justify everything all at once, right at the top. I feel like that gets very intimidating, and it doesn't always lead to the best results. I find with this, if you find one little area, you look at it and see one little thing, maybe that looks like an eye or that's a nose, and then you can build on that. I feel like that it gives me better results and it allows me to move forward. And it doesn't make me freeze up and overthink it. For example, with this particular painting, there was this splatter, this line that when I made it, it was horizontal. So it just went from left to right. And I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, that looks like a tie. And then the way it crossed this other line, it seemed like if I flipped it 90 degrees to the right, it had that image of a tie going down to the waist of a person. So that's where that started. I thought, okay, like this is definitely going to be a guy wearing a tie. And so then I just elaborated on that part. And as I'm doing that, it takes time. It allows me more time to look at it and meditate and think, okay, here's a man in a tie. And here's what he would look like. And here's some of his details. But what's around him? What is this environment? What are the colors telling me what could happen? And also with the style of what I like to draw. I love nonsensical things, and just exploring, putting things together that don't always make sense right away, or when in doubt, go dark, do a demon, something like that. So I think this one just wrote itself, which is such a cliche to say, but it honestly did. So yeah, if you're trying this at home or doing a technique like this, my advice is to start small. Just start with the tiniest of things, and then you can justify everything around it. And you know what? If it doesn't turn out, it doesn't turn out. It was a challenge. That's why. And this whole idea, the concept of this painting as it was coming forward, it was at a time where I was having some talks with Dante and just a lot of the philosophy. Who are we? Why are we here? What makes us happy? And related to the previous ArtCast that I had done, where we discussed careers and art and when to make art a career, when to make it a hobby and something that makes you happy. I guess that's been a question or a theme that was floating around at the time of making this. The title, I Paid the Cost to Be the Boss, is a piece of graffiti that's on the sidewalk outside of this Hare Krishna temple that we were walking by one day for some odd reason. And it aligned perfectly with what Dante and I had just been talking about maybe 10 minutes before we came across it and what we'd been feeling lately. And so we're just walking along and we looked down and the ground was communicating to us and said, I paid the cost to be the boss. And that's the question that I think a lot of people are asking themselves, whether you're doing art or whatever. You sign up to devote your life to something. You put your time and energy into something in hopes of continuing to live, whether you're growing your own food in the jungle and building your own shelter or making art videos on YouTube. You're putting your time into this, and somehow through some magical man-made alchemy, that time turns into money, which turns into food and shelter, which turns into the ability to continue doing that thing that you do and go get drinks with friends. So I guess we've been asking ourselves, well, what is this all for? Or at what point is it worth all this time and energy and effort? I think a lot of people are asking themselves in the creative world, but especially for me, being in the YouTube world, I'm seeing that a lot. And I'm seeing a lot of comments too on these ArtCast videos from other artists. And there's a common theme of people starting art channels and wondering, how do I build this? How do I make this worthwhile? Because I only have so much time in my day, and some of that time needs to be devoted toward making a living, making some income. And I need to justify all the time it takes to do an art YouTube channel. And that's frustrating. Again, in the previous ArtCast, we talked about the idea of when to accept maybe at the moment, this isn't the thing that I should be doing right now, or maybe I can't devote enough time to this. But then what is the alternative? And I think a lot of people face that. There's a time in my life where I was looking at getting jobs in places I would never have been happy and it had never been a first choice. Somebody told me, oh, you should work at the post office because they have really good retirement benefits. And it was coming from a point of view of, hey, just make sure you're taken care of forever. So get this job. And there was a relationship that I was in at one point where the guy got a job in just this office, and it was not a good environment. It wasn't work that he wanted to do. But I do feel like it was a growing experience. He didn't stay there forever and learned a lot of stuff about an area that none of us were familiar with. And so there was that benefit. But there was that moment of facing, just looking down the football field of your life and seeing yourself on the other side and where you could be. And my God, and it's so tempting when it is a job where it's the first time you have a salary and you have savings, you have health insurance, and it feels so comfy and secure, and it's nice and cozy, but you hate what it is, and you're looking at doing that for the rest of your life. Not to say that if you work in HR, you're doomed, but I don't want to work in HR. HR people, I'm sorry, you all made a terrible decision. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is existential crisis. So this painting became a man in a suit or in a tie and summoning a demon that I assume is his boss. I don't know if he's like the CEO of the company, but he's definitely a part of upper management. And that's where this painting came from. Let's move on to the questions finally, because there's so many to get to. If only I could find the file. Here we are. All right. So this first question is, first off, I want to do a shout out to Mateus Campos for just commenting, asking for this particular painting to be made into an ArtCast. It helped. I was like, which one do I ArtCast? And then I just did some searches in the comments and that came up. So if this is one you wanted to see in real time, you can go and thank Mateus. All right. So question 1 is from That Vegan Kid, who writes, I love your ArtCasts. They're very fun to listen to while I'm drawing. Thank you. And you might have talked about this before, but I'm really curious about how you combat artist block. I often find myself spending more time trying to decide what to make than actually making it. So I'd love to hear your tips on how to get your creative juices flowing. Maybe for your next ArtCast. I really like all your videos and they're really inspiring. I hope I can get as good as someday. Sorry, I got excited and I botched the whole last part of that comment. Question, artist block. That is a big one. That's something that a lot of people are always commenting on and asking about. Artist block, I feel some people will give you just the tough love answer of like, there's no such thing as artist block. Child, if you have artist block, you're not trying enough. The only thing that's blocking you is the artist, and that's yourself. Oh gosh, yeah, that's kind of true. Artist block, I find it's that, for me, it comes in many forms. One form is lack of motivation, where I'm like, I feel like I should draw something, but there's nothing on my mind immediately, so I'll just continue eating this cake. Oh, why did I spend the whole afternoon eating cake? I feel sick. I'm going to take a bath, a cake bath, because whenever I take a bath, I eat cake, and now I just have them so associated in my mind that when I hear running bath water, I go and grab a cake. That's my artist block. So there are exercises you can do. I believe I've said it before, something like the daily doodle challenge that I'm doing on my Instagram. Go follow me, instagram.com/MaryDoodles. And that's forcing me to churn out at least one thing a day. And whether it's just some little scribbly doodle or a full-on drawing. Some of them are good. Some of them are awful. Few of them are great. But that's really what it is. You're sifting through all the things in your head and seeing what pops out. You know, it's like panning for gold. All this dirt is not gold. It's not valuable, but eventually a little nugget's going to fall out and you're going to be like, I struck gold. And then your best friend shoots you and you realize you weren't my friend all along. They're like, that's right. I was using you. Also, I'm in love with Melissa. Melissa, my wife? Yes, Melissa, your wife. And she loves me, and we're taking the gold, and we're gonna buy a ranch, and I'm taking your horse too. And then you die sad and alone. But at least you found that nugget of gold. I'm sorry about the tangents today. I had a lot of coffee, and I'm very excited about multiple things. And now I've moved on to green tea. So, yeah, something like a daily doodle where you're just forcing yourself to get ideas out there on the page. That's awesome. Or, hey man, like up it, like get a nice cheap sketchbook of good drawing paper and fill 5 pages a day, something like that. Give yourself an assignment and you'll eventually just be throwing all these ideas, whether they're good or not, all the non sequiturs, they go on the page and then you have them to refer back to. If that's something that I'm terrible at and I'm trying to get better at it, I tend to put out an idea and then I abandon it. I'm like, okay, that's covered, moving on, can't go back. But then every now and then I flip through my old work and I realize, oh, that's really good. I want to elaborate on that. Or, I rediscover, I remind myself of a good idea that I had long ago out of nowhere. And I know you are creative, whoever you are listening to this, you're creative and you've had amazing ideas. You've had ideas where you're like, oh, that would be a really great book premise. And then most times we have these ideas and they just float away and then we forget about it. And the time comes where you want to make something. So you sit yourself down and you're like, I have nothing because it's not at the front of your mind. So figure out a system, whether it's a journal, a sketchbook, Post-it notes. I have just some digital files where I'm like, ideas for the future, that as soon as I get an idea, I just add it to the list. And then when I'm at a loss as to what to do, I just look at the list. But then I get overwhelmed by the list. I'm like, oh, which one do I pick? So I just need to get more disciplined at throwing a dart or grabbing the top one, getting it done with. Also, I have downloaded but not begun to read, oh gosh, what's it called? Why is it escaping my head? The Artist's Way, which is, I have only heard many great things about it, and it's very helpful. From what people say, when it comes to getting yourself disciplined and creating and just utilizing your thoughts and ideas and organizing that so that you make things. And one thing I have taken away from this book that I have yet to read, from what other people said, is the morning pages. Every morning you wake up and you just write 3 pages in a journal. And it doesn't have to be full sentences. It could just be words, random thoughts, what you dreamed, anything. There's no rules. You just instantly, when your day begins, fill 3 pages of whatever. And I've been doing that for almost a year now. I've skipped some days, of course. There have been days where I only get 1 page filled, but I've tried to do it as best as I can. And I've found, like, you trip over some really interesting ideas or thoughts or things that I accidentally solved my problem in some cases. And that goes deeper than art. That's becoming more of the self-searching and spiritual side of things, where you just reach in and reflect on your own self and like the subconscious starts coming out. But that's a really great way to not only get ideas for future projects, which I've gotten. My journal is full of like underlined things and circles and around sentences, but then it's also a great way of helping yourself. And there's this fantasy of the suffering artist, and some people think that you have to suffer to make great things. I don't believe that. I believe actually knowing yourself and knowing what you want to say and express is far more helpful than making something out of agony. I mean, when you're suffering, you can direct that toward creating. I think suffering is definitely it's more of a fuel to make you create, but with that fuel, you need the engineering of the vehicle and what it's going to be. And I don't know what this metaphor is, but suffering is like your turbo power. But knowing and understanding yourself will allow you to operate the vehicle so you don't crash. There you go. So yeah, I would say to get the juices flowing, just force yourself to create whatever you want or don't want, or you don't need to know. You don't need to know what you're going to make. Take that pressure off. All right, our next question is from Bill Montague, who writes, I have a question for your next ArtCast, Mary. I am 14 and I love art. At the moment, it's what I want to do, although I get scared about inking and coloring or anything permanent, as I always have that constant feeling that I'm going to mess up and it's permanent. But my best piece was inked. But anyway, how do you overcome this being scared to do something permanent? Sorry for making the question so long. Bill, this is one of the shorter questions I've seen. I've read so many novels on YouTube. Impermanence, immediacy, impermanence, immediacy. That was something we were chanting at Burning Man, because that's so much of what Burning Man is about, man. It's so cool. I've been possessed by the spirit of Greg Pripps, who's seeking shelter from the Trump in my body. So I understand. I've been there, especially when I was your age. A young, budding 14-year-old me was also afraid of that permanence. I'm sorry. The voices, the coffee, the everything. I completely get that fear of the permanence. And I think part of that is just being so hyper-focused on what you're making and the fact that, like, you're so young, Bill. When you're doing something for the first time, it's all so amazing. I mean, look at parents with little babies. Every single thing that baby does is amazing. It's incredible because it hasn't been done before by that individual. We were last night, I was holding this little newborn baby girl, and she's just so sweet and precious. And even just the little twitches in her face while she's sucking her gums or whatever, I don't know what she was doing. It was fascinating. And it's so precious because it's so new. As you make more art, you're gonna get jaded. You're gonna care less about it. But it's true. I think there's, I challenge you, Bill, to do some drawings or paintings that you are going to let go of. Make 5 throwaway paintings. And you don't actually have to throw them away, but make them with the intention of throwing them away once you're done. Burning them. Something that's built to be destroyed. We're going back to Burning Man, guys. That's what this is. That's a whole festival. People spend an entire year or more creating stuff to bring up there to set on fire in the middle of the desert. And they're beautiful, wonderful creations, but it's kind of a reminder that even the most incredible pieces that have had so much love and energy and time and money poured into them, they're going to be destroyed. In the long run, I mean the long, long run, they're going to be destroyed. So, stop thinking of things being permanent because the comet's going to take it out anyway. I don't know. Does anybody have any thoughts or has struggled with this before? Because I'd love to hear how people got over that hump. And it sounds like such a cheap response of like, get over it. But there will be some need to get over it. And I think making something, even if it's just like a tiny 4-inch by 4-inch square of scrap paper, just make a drawing, do it in ink, tear it up and throw it in the sink. Turn the water on and watch it dissolve. And then, Bill, your problem is solved. By Dr. Seuss. New question from Kitty Kate. Kitty Kate asks, how do you keep motivated and not run out of ideas? I'm going to circle that back to the artist block response in something like the Daily Doodles. Having a challenge like that, it holds me up to something, especially with the internet having expectations of getting a drawing every day, which sometimes I fall back on and sometimes I'm really good about it. And then B, it, forces me to do whatever. And if I don't have an idea, then I do something. And there's nothing wrong too with like, if you're doing a daily challenge with yourself, if one day you're just doodling a flower and then the next day you feel like you have nothing and you just doodle a flower again, that's amazing. That's totally fine. Like that's how you're going to get good at drawing flowers. That's how I got like the green cat thing that is now a thing with my things. That cat character, that came out of an airport mishap where I ended up sleeping at the airport in, I think I was going from Berlin to Amsterdam at that point. But I was very frustrated. I missed a flight because I'm stupid. And so I started drawing, and that cat character came out. And then that's become my go-to. If I have nothing, if I can't think of anything, I'll draw that. But then sometimes I'll do like scribbles and lines and swirls. So, yeah, I think if you're focusing on creating new ideas all the time, it can be very intimidating. But if you have your go-tos or, just like little scribbly patterns or habits that's like, if you have nothing in mind, you do this thing, there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, so I hope that helped. And what is the term? It's called invest, don't invent. I've heard this in improv comedy, because when you're on stage making up scenes and theater for like the first and last time, a lot of times people just want to think up things, scenarios like, oh yeah, we're at Thanksgiving dinner, we're about to rob a bank, and I'm going to get in my Bentley, and the president's here. And you just start piling things on when really all you need is one tiny little nugget. We're at Thanksgiving. Okay, I'm eating the turkey. The turkey is overdone. The turkey is too dry. But I'm very emotional about this turkey because I made it. I made it for the first time, and I'm very proud of it. So I'm going to act like it's the best thing in the world, if that makes any sense. Or like this particular piece that I'm making, the splatter painting turned into something, instead of justifying it all at once, instead of overcomplicating it, it could have been like, there's a man in a business suit, and there's files, and there's aliens and UFOs, and that looks like Sasquatch, and that looks like a flower, and blah, blah, blah. Like, you can do that. You can throw all those ideas out. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're struggling with just getting one idea out, it helps to simplify and focus in on that one idea and just stick to it and elaborate on it. I guess it's more of instead of like looking at a wide landscape, focus in on a close-up. I don't know. Does that make any sense? Who knows? Let me know if that makes any sense. I'm going to move on to a comment from Dishwashi, a question really. Dishwashi says, question, are there specific markers or pens you would recommend for use in a sketchbook with reasonably thick paper? Do markers that don't bleed actually exist, or are they just fantasy? Are there those markers? Is that just fantasy? I've been using Sakura Koi brush tip markers, and they work well for me. Open your sketchbook, turn to a blank page and see. I'm sorry, I'm singing. Queen. As a high song, I've been using Sakura Koi brush tip markers. I got that as a gift pack from Sakura themselves, and that's what happens when you make YouTube videos for a while. I'll never pay for anything again, ever. Haha. I'm gonna ride my golden scooter to the organic store. Peasants. You may have noticed I'm having a stroke throughout this whole video. The Sakura brush tip markers I've had great luck with, and I use them on Moleskine sketchbook paper, which is what I've been using for my daily doodles. And yeah, I haven't had any issues with those bleeding. If anybody else has any ideas of markers that don't bleed through regular drawing paper, comment below. Let's share. Let's spread that knowledge. Because, most of the marker experiences I've had, there's been some bleed through with paper. And you can also get sketchbooks that are marker paper, but I've gotten one and I've had it for 2 years. I'm like 10 pages in because it is such a specified thing. So, let's share and care. And I will have a link in the description below to where you can get those Sakura brush tip markers if you're curious about them. And I like the brush tip. You can do really pretty lines. You can do fine lines, thick lines, all that goodness. And I've had them for over a year, I would say, definitely over a year. And they're still rocking. There's one marker that is just now dying. It's not like I use them every day all the time, but yeah, they've lasted a good long time, and the brush tips are still very nice and very, they're not like falling apart. So I found them to be a good quality marker. Question from Claire Schiffbauer. Am I saying that right? Claire Schiffbauer. Hey, Mary, could you try to make my... Let me start again. Hey, Mary, could I try to make my own versions of your drawings and paintings? I feel really inspired by your art. Claire, yes. Yeah, there's definitely like stigma toward copying other people's work, but then I also feel like that's how many artists begin and get good. I started drawing Pokemon comics that I would get in Nintendo Power magazine. I'm like, oh, I like this. I'm going to draw this. I'm going to learn to draw via Pokemon. And even in art class in high school, there was a watercolor class we took, and one of the assignments was the master match, where the teacher had a bunch of examples of watercolor paintings, and you picked one and you tried to recreate it. And the cool thing about that is it forces you to reverse engineer painting. So you're looking at what someone did, and without their help, without their referencing, you try to figure out, you guess, how did they get this effect? What was this layer about? Where did they start with, and how do you get to that end? So that's an amazing exercise. I would warn against, like, if you make these and then start putting them on t-shirts and they sell and you make millions, I will sue you. Claire, I will sue you. No. That's where it gets tricky in this century, because it's so easy to just copy things, and people have seen their works like redistributed, or people claiming to have made that. It's the internet thing. But yeah, the practice of copying other people's artwork as a study or to improve has been popular like for centuries. And even in like, there's like so many. I was listening to a podcast by Daniele Bolelli, History on Fire. He's inspired by hardcore history. But anyway, he did one podcast recently on Caravaggio, the Italian painter, and talking about the rivalries between him and like other painters, and how when his style got very popular, there were then the posers and the people who are just riding off of his style. And then, he's made famous paintings, and there's imagery that he's used that is then duplicated by other artists down the way. Like the, what is the name of the painting from Caravaggio? I'm going to Google this right now. Painting, what is the story of Judith cut off the head of the soldier? Judith beheading. And so it's a gorgeous painting. If you do a search of Judith beheading Holofernes, it's a grisly, gruesome painting, but there's another artist who replicated that painting. So like Caravaggio did the original composition of it, and then other artists just pretty much imitated that composition, but did it in their own style. So, long story short, yes, if you want to practice and recreate or do your own take on what I've done, go for it, by all means. That's something that artists have been doing throughout history. Don't be a millionaire off of that work based on mine unless you buy me a property where I can build a tiny home and raise goats. Thank you. Thank you, Claire. All right, let's move on to a question by SKKO, literally SKKO, who writes, I don't know if this is an issue I'm alone with, but sometimes when I'm really happy with a drawing, people I show it to feel somehow indifferent. And when I've drawn something I don't feel too good about, people are like, that's amazing. It's a small thing, but it bothers me a bit. Have you dealt with something similar? And if so, how do you feel about it? Yes, you are not alone. You are absolutely not alone. I get this all the time, and I think a lot of other artists do too. Part of that, I think it's just because of perspective. You have a very different experience with what you've made versus what other people are experiencing. And that's why you can feel really crummy about what you've made, because it didn't turn out the way you saw it in your head, but you show it to somebody and they're seeing it for the first time. They're seeing it with no expectations or very few. And so it could be amazing to them. Personally, when I read your question, it made me think of the Draw It Again videos that I've done. And there's another one that is going to come up around the corner of some of my second grade artwork. But I was doing recreations of drawings and paintings I made when I was, 13, 14, and I've changed and grown as a human being. So the videos would be me redrawing it, and then you see the images side by side. And I was amazed because some of the response was, I liked your old stuff better. And through some of the comments, people were referring to the shading, or that looks more realistic. There's a particular one with a jackalope that has a human hand in its mouth. And I get that. I liked the newer version better because it is more of the style that I've been developing over the years, which is a little more cartoony, exaggerated, messing with proportions, but I feel like I'm better at the gestures, and I'm improving on the flow. I like that. I like focusing in on that, and creating characters and playing with different shapes as opposed to just going with the classic beauty look. I think not to dishonor anime, but as an example, when I did do a lot of anime drawings, there's kind of this standard, like this glamorous standard. Whereas like with this current painting that you're watching me make, I like playing with, people with different nose shapes, or people have something that's a little off with them. And that's more realistic compared to like when you look at the real world, like people, not everybody women don't all look like a Marilyn Monroe. Like we all have different shapes and proportions. So I like showing that in art and in what I'm making now. So going back to the jackalope thing, at the time when I made the original one, I was, I think, in 8th grade, and I was playing with doing realistic drawings. And then when I recreated it, a couple years ago, I was more into doing cartoons and characters, and also working with minimalism, using shadow and alluding to things rather than drawing every little detail. I was in a very different place. And that's the whole point of that exercise, is to see, oh, this is where I was and this is where I am now. But going back to your question, I found it very fascinating. People preferred the old one because, as some referenced, it looked more realistic. And I find that's a very common thing, especially with people who don't do art. They will appreciate or like or consider something to be good if it's closer to looking realistic. And my theory on that is just because that's the frame of reference they have. And yes, I feel very weird about things where I'm not proud about it, but then people are like, oh my God, I love that. Can I buy that from you? I'm like, do you really want this? This is like the worst thing I've ever made. You probably shouldn't have this, which is so funny. But there you go. That's kind of the magic of art and creativity of all sorts. Like people gravitate to what they gravitate toward, and it differs vastly between people and among us. And you just got to respect that. So I'm going to start wrapping it up right now. As you are hearing my voice at this point, I have recorded this outro about a week after the initial video ArtCast that I recorded. So I had exported it all as one big video. It was the full real-time painting process of this, and it was about an hour and a half long. I got so close to uploading it when I realized there were some technical difficulties and glitches, and it took so long to export it. I figured I'm just going to chop it in half. It'll go faster on my end. So apologies for the lack of a video last week. I will be uploading part 2 later on this week, probably around Thursday. Thanksgiving. Ooh, yeah, maybe Wednesday, Thursday, something to be thankful for. And thank you, Doodlebugs, for listening in, and I will be posting the audio version of these ArtCasts on SoundCloud. There will be a link in the description below where you can listen to that if you just want audio only. And if you want a podcast, like an actual podcast featuring myself and Dante, also known as Give Me Motion, you can go to Peas in a Podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Peas in a Podcast. Yeah, we're doing a weekly podcast thing going on. It's gonna be awesome. Our upcoming one is weird. It's just weird. So yes, thank you very much for listening, Doodlebugs. Goodbye.